Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Bob Ward, pollster and partner at Fabrizio Ward. Bob, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You and I have been talking now for months about just how close this presidential race is between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. And now, as we sit here, we are 2 weeks away, and a new AARP poll out of swing state Nevada shows just how tight of a race this is. Trump is up ever so slightly, but what can you tell us?
Yeah, it's a real toss-up state, and yeah, you're right. Trump is up by a point. Um, he's at 47. Harris is at 46. This is our second poll we've done in Nevada. The first was back in June when Biden was still at the top of the ticket, and back then Trump had a 7-point lead over Biden. So there's been sort of a net movement of 6 points since Harris has become top of the ticket. But boy, I would still characterize this as a toss-up race.
You're characterizing this as a toss up. It really could certainly be anyone's race. It's within the margin of error. But when you look at the demographics, when you break down this poll, you see certain groups going for one candidate over another. What can you tell us about those demos?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one I focused on first is the divide between older and younger voters, because this is something that we've consistently seen. Older voters tend to be more Republican. In Nevada, they have I think a +5 party registration, or not party identification edge. Um, uh, Trump is leading among voters 50 plus by 7 points. Harris has a 5 point edge among those voters under 50. Her strength is really in the youngest age group, the 18 to 34-year-olds. That's the only age group in which she actually is ahead, but she's ahead by 14 points. Everything north of age 35, Trump has some advantage. The strongest being among those working age older voters, those 50 to 64, where he's got a 9 point lead. So, and we know that older voters probably have an edge on turnout because they are telling us they're more motivated to vote than younger voters. So even as we look at this poll of likely voters, there's still, some uncertainty as to who actually will show up and vote. And people are voting now in Nevada. But ultimately, what's the final tally going to be? And there's indications because of that higher vote motivation that older voters could make up an even larger share of the electorate. And according to these numbers, that would advantage Trump.
And
Another big demographic, just real quick, is the gender gap. And I know we've heard a lot about that, but it's huge. It's a net 33-point gender gap where Trump is ahead by 18 points among men, and Harris is ahead by 15 points among women. So that's pretty cavernous.
that is a monstrous gap there. I do want to go back to those older voters because you and I have been
Yeah.
talking about them from various battleground states. And state by state, you have found that they are more motivated to go out opposed to the younger groups. What issues do they care about specifically in Nevada? And are those issues the same ones that younger voters care about?
So older voters, we look at a variety of ways to measure issue interest. We have a list of 13 issues that we read to poll respondents. What tops that list consistently in both Nevada and also in other battleground states is immigration and border security. However, if that is your number one issue, you're voting for Trump. There's few voters out there who pick immigration and border security who are not voting for Trump. So that is definitely sort of one of those base motivating issues. Right behind immigration and border security are economic issues. Inflation, jobs, those are big concerns among older voters in Nevada. And there too, Trump has an advantage, but not nearly to the extent that he does with immigration. It is one of those issues that is sort of a headwind to Vice President Harris. There's a lot of blame put on the administration as to the state of the economy today. She's not going to win that issue, but if she's going to win a state like Nevada in the next 2 weeks, she really has to do a bit better in making the case that she's better on economic issues than Trump, at least for a small margin of voters. The next part of your question is what's the difference between older and younger voters? Broadly, not much. And so even younger voters prioritize immigration and economic issues. I think when it comes to the economy, however, younger voters do have a different concern. Their number one issue is housing, and the cost of housing is a big issue, not just in Nevada, but across the country and a lot of these battleground states as well. And so for older voters, it's more of the pocketbook, everyday expenses. There's a question we asked in the survey: what is it that's driving your cost concerns? And for older voters, the number one issue by far is like cost of groceries and food. Whereas among younger voters, housing is a much bigger issue. And so that, I think, is the big divide between older and younger voters in this race.
What's really interesting in Nevada, you're seeing this razor thin presidential race with the Republican Donald Trump ever so slightly ahead of the Democrat Vice President Kamala Harris. But then the Senate race is a really different story with the incumbent Senator, Democrat Jackie Rosen, up 49-45 or 49-44 to the Republican challenger Sam Brown. Paint that picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, and that race actually hasn't changed since our last survey in June. We had Rosen up by 5 points then, and she's up 5 points now. A lot of the same demographic differences exist in the Senate race, but Jackie Rosen is running ahead of Harris, across a number of groups. She has much better numbers, for example, among younger voters and independents. So younger voters a little less confident as to how well they'll turn out, but Rosen has a bit of an edge there over Harris in terms of her ability to pull them together. And Harris is behind by 7 points among independents, while Rosen is ahead by 3 points. So that's a big difference between the two. The gender gap is the same. There's a big gender gap in the Senate race as there is in the presidential race. And among older voters, Sam Brown is actually ahead by 3 points. So older voters do tend to be more Republican in Nevada, and they're showing that. But Rosen's support among younger voters is a net 16 points, and that's a lot bigger than where Harris is over Trump.
The difference between Rosen and Harris when it comes to independent voters is huge. So talk about swing voters in Nevada. How big of a block are they?
Well, we focus in on the older voter in Nevada. 16% are swing voters. And what does that mean? It means they're not voting a straight party ticket, right? They're not. We have 46% of older Nevada voters who are straight ticket Republicans and 38% who are straight ticket Democrats. Those 16% left over are either undecided or moving, from Republican on one ballot to Democrat on the other. They're saying that they're in play and they're not, rock-ribbed partisans. And what's moving them goes back to the economy, even more so. So while straight ticket Republicans are interested in the economy and really interested in immigration, straight ticket Democrats are really interested in abortion, reproductive issues, and threats to democracy. Those swing voters, their number one issues are inflation, jobs in the economy, taxes. So these sort of personal economic issues are motivating them. And again, whatever campaign can do the most to close the deal in the last 2 weeks, that they're better able to handle these economic issues, is going to give them an edge in this very close race.
So you're saying that's what the campaign should focus on in these 2 weeks: the economy, the economy, the economy, especially when it comes to Nevada.
Yes, especially as it comes to Nevada. But I mean, there's lots of things the campaign needs to do. They need to motivate their vote base. They're going to talk about those cultural issues. But in terms of persuasion and getting those swing voters to commit to one side or the other, the economic issues are where it's at.
Bob, every week you and I talk about your findings in different battleground states, the states that really matter in this election. Every state obviously matters, but the battleground states more so. This one, does this look like those other 7 states we've talked about, we've honed in on, particularly its neighbor, Arizona?
So I would say that Nevada is maybe a hair more towards the Democrat than Arizona is, but they're close. The issue profile is the same. So it definitely looks like, slight advantage to Trump in both of those states, as Arizona a little bit more. And, it's it's a smaller state, and so it has to be. If you're thinking about electoral map, it has to pair with other states to add up. Let's say if the blue wall doesn't hold for Harris, and she loses one of those or more of those states, it would be very difficult for them to just make up by winning Nevada. It would have to be in conjunction with Arizona or with North Carolina or with Georgia, and so it's not a must-win for the Harris campaign, but it's an option. And as we get closer to election day, and all of these battleground states are still within a point or two of each other, the electoral math and the paths to victory have become really complicated.
And there's 6 electoral votes up for grabs in Nevada, so obviously it's not as crucial as those 19 in Pennsylvania, the 11 in the other battleground states, some of them. So you're saying this isn't a must-win for Harris, but who does this help their pathway to victory more, Trump or Harris?
Well, I think it helps. It helps Trump because she can win without Nevada. He can't win. I think if Nevada goes, it's I think probably a symbol of other problems, perhaps in Arizona as well. So I do think it is sort of a must win for him. But both campaigns can win without winning Nevada. So it's not really must win for either campaign. Not like Pennsylvania, for example, where really it is must win for both campaigns.
Bob, this is your last battleground poll between now and November 5th. So when you're thinking about all the data you have collected so far, what are you looking at specifically between now and Election Day? Because voting, as we know, has already started in most states.
It has. There's been a lot of votes cast. And I think we're seeing, as we hear about reports of early voting, a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, we're no longer in a pandemic, and so that sort of has changed in who was voting early in 4 years ago to now. The other thing is we had a presidential campaign 4 years ago discouraging people from voting early. And that same campaign is now encouraging people to vote early. So when we see spikes in more Republicans are voting early, well, they're being asked to by the candidate. So that is one of the things people will be looking at. What I'm going to be looking at as these last polls come in is the motivation factor to vote, and is there still going to be a gap between older and younger voters? If there is, I really do think that that's sort of one of those things that push a close election into Trump's favor, because older voters are leaning more Trump than younger voters are. So everyone says it comes down to turnout. It really does, especially in close races like this. But when you're in a close race, really everything matters, because it doesn't take too many votes to tip a race.
Well, Bob, there's certainly a lot to look out between now and November 5th. But thank you so much for all your polling, for all of your insight and expertise in these conversations this election season. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.